Hello, I'm Richard Hewitt, Director for Higher Education in the UK for Lightcast, formerly known as Emsi Burning Glass, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, I'm going to run through the kind of labour market data that is often used by universities when they're planning what programmes to offer. Without a doubt, student demand is the critical factor in most universities when deciding what to do. However, it's not the only factor, particularly as the outcomes for students become ever more important for the students themselves, of course, but also your institution, regulatory bodies, government, and so on. LMI, Labour Market Intelligence or Insight, isn't a single data set. It comprises multiple surveys and data sets that provide different types of insight that illuminate local, regional and national economies and the skills needs within them. To give us a framework to explore this, I'm going to examine labour markets from three perspectives: place, priority and provision. These reflect the way universities set about establishing parameters for deciding how to implement insights from labour market data when they're planning. So let me share my screen with you. There we are. There we go. So let's start with place. The UK isn't created equal. This is a representation of the digital cluster of industries by job volume across the UK at county or unitary authority level in 2021. There are hotspots in most regions, but cold spots too. Responding to national trends is fine, but be wary of the expectations you're setting and the advice you're giving. What place is important to your institution? To answer that, you need to think about where you are, where your students come from, and of course, where your graduates tend to go on to. What you'll probably find is that large proportions either stay in your region or return to their home region. And of course, there'll be a significant overlap between these groups. Responding to a national trend that isn't borne out in your key regions of interest could be problematic, of course. So let's explore this with some data or some other data. So architecture is something I get asked about all the time by universities in every region. Tell us about the labour market for architects. It's really, seems everyone is asking that. So I've kept it simple here, and I'm only showing data for one occupation, architects. I could include associated occupations like chartered architectural technologists and draftspeople, but I'm keeping it simple for these purposes. Also, I'm only looking at England. Now, we've got the figures for the home nations, but to be useful, we'd need to be looking below government office region geographies, and that's too much data really for a slide like this. Well, the picture for architects in England isn't uniform. And perhaps unsurprisingly, there's a huge concentration of those jobs in London projected for 2031, 45% of the total in England, in fact. There are other lenses to consider, though, besides volume. This is looking at architects by projected percentage change in jobs over this decade. To be clear, this is based on a trend-based projection, so it's not a forecast or a prediction, but it gives us a solid baseline to work from. And what stands out here is there is decline in 3 northern regions, particularly in the northeast, which, if you remember from the previous slide, had a low volume in any case, which is, of course, why the percentage change is so significant here. This is just looking at one occupation, however. Other occupations could look different. So let's take software and programming folk. Programmers and software development professionals are much more evenly spread around the country compared to architects. London is projected to have just 28% of those jobs in 2031, and here the northern regions are far stronger. Again, we can look at these figures through a growth lens, and the picture is very different. London is actually on a downwards trend, joined only by the northeast, which had a low prevalence of these jobs anyway. The East Midlands and Southwest are seeing significant growth, on the other hand. The point here is that place is important, as the local market operates differently at a local level because of differences in the local industry mix. That impacts what jobs are employed and which skills are needed. National trends are an aggregate of these. Hot and cold spots and nuance are easily lost. So defining place is critical to making decisions based on data that's relevant to your institution. Once you've identified the geography or geographies which are critical to you, it's then important to consider what is important when examining that geography. And this is what I mean by priority. What are the factors that are important to your institution? This will help determine which aspects of the labour market you respond to and which data you need to query. So let's look at the industry mix at regional level. We just saw some weak data in the northeast, so let's see if we can find some strengths. Here we have the largest industries in the northeast by 4-digit SIC codes. That's the industry taxonomy used by the Office for National Statistics, and we've juxtaposed that with wages. Industries by volume of jobs seems like a sensible place to start, and we can see the importance of the public sector. We have hospital activities and general public administration activities right at the top there. We can also see that there is decline coming in some of the largest industries by employment. We can see some strength and growth in private sector industries like beverage serving activities. But looking at the wage data and thinking about what that sector is, does that represent significant graduate opportunity? Whatever we want to call it, or high-skilled opportunity, or professional employment. Let's look at it the other way around, by wages. Here we have the highest paying industries in the northeast juxtaposed with the volume of jobs. Clearly, there are some high-paying jobs, but the volumes are low. Nevertheless, there is overlap in these two key metrics in passenger air transport and the wider energy sector. Another way of coming at this is by growth. So here we have the fastest growing industries in the northeast by projected net change in jobs between 2021 and 2031. At the top of this list is the SIC code, other business support service activities not elsewhere classified. So while it's great to have these standardized national taxonomies that we can all use, this kind of group is really hard to understand, at least from its name. But what we want to actually get under the skin of, so we can consider the implications for planning, is, well, we need to understand what comprises this group. And here we've see growth. We've seen areas of decline, and we need to find areas of growth. So let's look at a staffing pattern. And this is the staffing pattern for other business support service activities not elsewhere classified. But we're only looking at the top 4 occupations important for graduate employment. So a staffing pattern, for those who are not familiar, this is where we can see which occupations are employed within the industry that we're looking at. And what I've done is try to just focus in on those occupations which are likely to be destination occupations for freshly graduated graduates. So SOC 2 and SOC 3 occupation codes. If we think when the government talks about professional employment and high skilled jobs, they mean SOC 1, SOC 2, or SOC 3 groupings, and we see that coming through in our graduate outcomes data. Now, SOC 1 tend to be directors and managers, so I'm going to ignore those. And SOC 2 are professional roles, and SOC 3 are associate professionals and technical roles. So just looking at those SOC 2 and SOC 3 groups really are really what are important. So we found an industry of growth. We're now seeing what are the graduate type employment making up that industry in the Northeast. Clearly, there's strong growth projected for all of them, which will be associated with the industry growth figures. And we can see that sales and marketing roles are very significant indeed. So that's a route into understanding place by industry, which then leads us to occupations. Of course, we could just skip the industry data altogether, skip being sector-led, and just start with the jobs themselves, start with occupations. So here are the top occupations in those professional and associate professional occupation groups by volume in the Northeast. Doctors, nurses, teachers, salespeople. As we did before, though, we can select different metrics according to our priorities. So let's look at one that our economists like to use: openings, the number of new jobs added annually, either through growth or through replenishment, replacing people who have left the occupation either through retirement or moving to a job in a different occupation. And this is the same data, but rather than sorted by volume, sorted by openings. As it happens, the same jobs come up, albeit in a different order. You may notice that we have the most added jobs in occupations that also see declining growth rates. Now that's possible because openings is a gross added job measure, while growth rates are net. So let's look at this data by those net growth rates. And here we have, again, the same occupations, those are professional and associate professional and technical roles, by percentage net growth in the Northeast. But I've added a threshold with at least 500 jobs in 2031. And I've put in that threshold because otherwise the low volumes really skew what comes at the top in percentage terms. And here we see quite a different set of occupations and quite different stories when it comes to volumes. You'll note in the table there's a metric we haven't looked at yet, which is location quotients. This is a way of measuring the prevalence of those jobs in this region compared to the national average. So a local specialism almost. And here we have that. So same occupations, but sorted by location quotient in the Northeast with at least 500 jobs in 2031. And it seems when we sort it that way, the 4-digit occupations, those detailed occupations that are coming to the top, include things like careers people being particularly concentrated in the Northeast, as are people working in quality control. So we've looked at a number of different metrics here, and which ones we use or prioritize in our decision making will depend on an institution's strategy or its existing provision, student demand trends, and external pressures like funding or graduate outcomes. Every university we work with deals with these differently, but what's important is that it's done systematically with intent and is informed by data. It's one thing to look at the LMI, though. It is another to connect it into provision. So let's just add that step to the data journey. Sticking with quality assurance jobs in the Northeast, which had pretty robust LMI, as we just saw, let's look at what jobs actually make up that occupation by looking at job postings in the past year. Here, we can see the top job titles recruited within that occupation, the SOC code 3115 quality assurance technicians. So in that family, in the Northeast, and I've looked at job postings over the past year. So that's April 2021 to May 2022. This can help us understand what kind of jobs we're talking about, as these occupational taxonomies don't always paint a picture that's easy to associate with the real world. We can go another level lower, though, and look at skills. Here we have the skills that feed into that occupation in the Northeast. Again, looking at the same sample, the same year, same region, same occupation. So skills for us at Lightcast mean any term of value used by employers in the labour market. We take these and normalize them against our open skills taxonomy. And what we're looking at here are the skills grouped by subcategory, the subcategory layer in our taxonomy. And there's about 400 or so subcategories. It's both unsurprising and reassuring to see the quality assurance and control subcategory right at the top there. So clearly the data is matching as we would hope it would. And we can then look below that. So those were subcategories, but we can go right down to the skills layer. And so here what we're doing is looking at skills, but we're looking at common skills. For us, that means transferable skills, soft skills, 21st century skills, anything that we see in the data that is commonly cited across occupations. And that's why here we can see a mix of soft skills and things like computer literacy in the middle there on this list. And that's an important point. Our open skills taxonomy is driven by data. It's not a pedagogical model. It's not trying to impose our view of the world. It's a bottom-up designed taxonomy. So categories are informed by where we see clustering, and skills that aren't heavily concentrated in just a few jobs are common. Those which are highly concentrated by occupation are classified as specialized, and so on. I should also say the skills themselves are updated every 2 weeks. So it's a dynamic taxonomy as well that reflects what's happening right now out there in the world. So it's not something that goes out of date 6 months after you publish it. So that is rather useful in this fast-paced world that we live in. But let's look at those specialized skills or hard skills. So here we have those top specialized skills. Generally, it's domain expertise, things that need to be taught. But I was quite interested when I was preparing this to see housekeeping in the middle there. So I dug into the raw data to isolate those postings, citing that skill. And sure enough, improving laboratory housekeeping is what the employers were asking for. So having the flexibility to check the data and your understanding of it is really, really helpful in the analyst platform that we use to get all of this data. And then a subset of the specialized skills are software skills. And here we can see which are the most commonly cited by employers advertising for quality assurance technicians. So seeing aggregated skills data in an occupation of interest gets us much closer to seeing a fit against provision, and it can inform course design as well. We can take another step closer to your offer, though, in a different way. This is something we're working on, and it will be in our analyst tool for the new academic year. But we can see a kind of beta version of it now, and those of you who have access to analysts will already be able to see this in the higher education module. But here we can see the programs that feed into that occupation in the Northeast according to a mapping that we've generated using nationally aggregated graduate outcomes data, as well as the labour force survey and the occupation profiles that we can see within that by education. And we're using HESA qualifiers data to see which programs tend to deliver graduates into that occupation. So we're seeing, according to the mapping, we're not weighting it according to the mapping, but we can see all of the courses that feed into that particular occupation potentially. And then we're seeing, okay, well, where are the majority of, how do we rank those courses by number of graduates by year? So that gives us a sense of graduate supply into the labour market and where that might come from. What's the pipeline? So this hence is called the Education Pipeline Report. So, and the completed version will be slightly different from this in that we will have all of the data, not just up to 2018. And rather than JAX, we'll be using CAH3, which I imagine if you're listening to this, you're going to be familiar with. But connecting the labour market to education, it's always a challenge, and be it via skills data or occupation mapping, this is something that's a priority for both us and our clients, and it's something we're always innovating in and supporting our clients with. So that brings me to the end of the session. I'm sorry I'm not able to take questions live today, but please drop me an email if you'd like to see the analyst platform, which generated all of this data I've shared with you. And it literally took me a couple of minutes to generate all of those charts and tables. It's really, really quick. Of course, if you already use the analyst platform and you saw some charts or graphs that looked unfamiliar, do reach out to your account manager so we can make sure that you can do the same. It's all there. It's all quite straightforward to do. But if it's something you haven't done recently or would like us to help you with, do reach out because we can jump on the call with you and help you with that. Thank you very much for joining me. And I look forward to hearing from you directly. Thank you.